Hello. Today we're going to make a hollow core figure in clay. A hollow core figure has no armature inside. Instead, it's rolled from a slab of clay. The slab of clay is consistent in thickness. It's been rolled out to a thickness of a centimeter or two. It depends on the size of the object that you're going to make. The thickness of the clay needs to support the weight of the figure as you're working on it. So this project really does begin as nothing. You have to roll a slab out to a consistent thickness. You can decide to roll a round slab or a rectangular slab, I suppose, but it's important to visualize the size of the figure that you want to make and the approximate shape. In this case, I've rolled a round slab and rolled it up as if it were a wrap, a sandwich. And then I started to score and slip along a central spine. That spine is where the two sides of the rolled circle overlap. I've scored, slipped, and now I'm adding a piece of reinforcement to the inside. Nobody sees the inside of your figure, so you can support the external side with whatever means of clay to support the inside is necessary. I've given some shape to the top of the cylinder. I've pinched and rounded the edges to give some form to what will be the shoulders. And now I've taken some strips of clay and I'm attaching them to the inside of the cylinder because they'll support clay that I'm building to the outside, so the shoulders themselves. At this point, the form is very general, very non-specific. I'm turning it in my hands, I'm pushing, shaping, applying pressure, and rounding surfaces to give it some kind of very preliminary human form. I'm looking to approximate the proportions of the figure that I want to extend into higher definition. My focus at this point is to ensure that I have something that's going to survive. That means I'm working from the inside with a hand inserted into the cylinder and applying pressure from the outside against the inside hand. So I really am working internally and externally at the same time. So why wouldn't a piece survive? Well, for a number of reasons, actually. You're going to be joining pieces of clay together of varying thicknesses and weights. In some cases, you'll be attaching arms or legs or a head. Sometimes the neck can be attached separately too. If that clay is too thin and the connection to the thicker torso is not substantial enough, then as the clay dries, remember it thins and the thin clay weakens the joint. So you could have cracking, separation, or just pieces falling apart. You really don't want that. At this point, you really want to focus on good construction. Make sure you have enough clay slip in between those layers that come together with scoring and slipping, and press them together very well. This phase of the project can be a little bit precarious. There are sort of floppy areas, thinner and thicker areas, and you're working really quickly just to reinforce those areas as best you can. A simple armature can allow you to post this and get some of the weight out of your hands, but this clay is too wet and this armature would go right through the top of it, so I can't use it yet. I'm quickly grabbing small amounts of clay that I can flatten, shape in a very expedient way to attach to the outside of that cylinder of clay that becomes the figure. Right now I'm laying some clay over top of the shoulder straps that I put into place as underlying supports for this clay. It's so wet that it would collapse on itself if it had no underlying support, so that's why those straps are in place. So the double edge of the sword here is that I have clay that is very workable. It's wet and soft, shapeable, and that's a joy to work with. At the same time, those same qualities make this form pretty much unable to support its own weight. So I'm working with one hand inside the cylinder and the other hand doing the application of the clay. So the the awkwardness here is that my right hand is actually a simple support for the inside. My arm is the armature, and my left hand is applying the little bits of clay. So as this form takes shape, it's going to require me to work with one hand. This is the tricky part. By all means, you're going to have some frustrations here because the clay will want to collapse in on itself as you're trying to attach enough clay to it to support its own weight so it can be independent of the arm that's inside. It's a challenge, but if you embrace the challenge, you can get some really interesting results, and I encourage you to be patient with it. So I'm constantly turning and looking and making small decisions about the development of this form. When I'm confident that I have enough support inside, enough clay over seams, enough blending to support the external structure, I can begin to refine those shapes and some of the details of the form as it evolves. Remember, I'm working from the very general to the slightly less general to the slightly less general to more specific. And as I begin to work more specifically, those kinds of shapes start to emerge. You don't want to put too much detail into one area. This kind of sculpture should be considered an exploration of human form. I have no intention of making four limbs and a head. It's not going to be any specific person. Instead, it's a study. It's a examination of human form, and for that reason, it won't be highly resolved in any overall sense. Arms and legs are not important to me. Instead, it's going to be a torso, and that torso will demonstrate the subtlety of form, the roundness of curves, the interplay of surfaces. It's a very worthwhile exercise, and it'll be something that I can make decisions over as it evolves. I've already decided no, it doesn't need arms, but I do have to accommodate the shoulders to make a logical transition between the solid forms of the torso and the suggested space of the arms that would be attached. So I have to make those kinds of adjustments. I'm slowly and gradually refining the form to achieve those kinds of subtle surfaces. Now, with this kind of figure study, it's important to keep turning and looking and adding. You can work from the inside or from the outside at this point. And what you're looking for are little surface cracks or weak areas. And weak areas can be supported from the inside because nobody sees the inside of your sculpture. Sometimes it's more important to reinforce something from the outside, but not always. Variety is important. You don't want your entire figure to be perfectly smooth. You'd rather have some rough areas, some areas that are less defined, and some areas that are very highly defined. This sense of variety in the figure will cause people to want to examine it from all angles. Sculpture is round, and you want people to move around it and explore. In the end, you could consider how you might display it. A couple of holes in the back of this figure will allow me to put it on a piece of wire and hang it, if that's what I really want to do. Anyway, the idea here is that you work until you feel it's resolved. It's fun because there are no arms or legs to be bothered with. The head is not necessarily a requirement. It's an exploration of the form. And you can be as selective in exploring that form as you wish. You're the artist, so it's completely up to you to decide when the project is finished. Remember to give it plenty of time to dry. These are hollow core figures. Enjoy them.